kind of face
Oh,
melting.
right. Folks,
I
I'm
gave
Tom
myself a
Vasel.
slight headache. I'm Zee Garcia. I'm too old.
You okay?
I'm okay.
You all right? I'm Sam Healey. What's up, y'all?
All right, it's been a couple weeks since more than a couple weeks since we've done a talk
Almost
back.
a month.
Yeah, well, we were doing a lot. There's a lot of conventions going on, and we want to talk about two of the big ones. That is Essen Spiel and GenCon. And a lot of people ask us to compare and contrast.
Yes.
That happens all the time.
Yes.
People in Europe will come and say, how does GenCon compare to this? People in America are like, whoa, what do you think about Essen? So that happens often. Just to clarify, they're both big conventions. GenCon is run in Indianapolis each year, usually in August. It is easily the largest tabletop convention in America.
Yes.
Their numbers are like just around 60,000. And Essen is a large board game convention. It used to be board game and comics. Now I think comics was like 2 aisles.
They're barely there.
Barely there, right?
Or anything else, really.
Yeah. And we don't know the exact numbers because they use turnstile numbers there, which, you mark each one. So they said, I think, 176,000 this year. Gen Con's turnstile numbers were 200,000. But it's really hard to tell which one has more because Gen Con, a lot of people there come for all the days, while Essen, there's a lot of people who come for just one day or more.
Right.
Now, we have different kind of perspectives on this because we've gone to these as exhibitors. And there's definitely a difference going to convention as an exhibitor or going as a someone just
Well, you've probably done both, haven't you? Because I've done both at both conventions.
Yeah, well, I was always doing like a reporter type thing, even if I was just wandering around. But yeah, there's definitely a different feel when you have a convention. I feel like both conventions have a very distinct feel, honestly. The only thing I think that they have in common, other than board games, obviously, is crowds.
Yes, very much.
But other than that, I really feel like they give me a very different vibe.
They do. Yeah, very much so. I think Gen Con is, there's more... I know it sounds strange because if you go to Essen, you see people playing games everywhere you go.
Yeah.
But it's not the same as the kind of game playing that's going on at Gen Con.
Well, you see people playing demos everywhere.
Right. But they're playing games. They're demoing games. They're playing games. But it gives you a different feel. One of the people that was there, and I can't remember who said this, but they were watching people play games. I think it was one of the exhibitors. Maybe it was Stefan that was telling us about this, how they were dealing with these customers and they wanted to demo a game that they didn't have for demo at Essen. And they said, but we want to buy it. And they had it for sale, but they didn't have it for demo. So, and there was this thing where they wanted to buy the game, but they wanted to demo it first. And that's what it felt like. It felt like almost a trade show for customers.
Yes.
It felt like a trade show for customers.
Yes. Where you go and you sample things and then you make your purchases.
Instead of a gaming convention. So that's what it felt like to me.
I guess ultimately the way I think of that aspect of it, it's Essen has the ability, just the quality of being a lot less, for lack of a better term, geeky. It's a lot less geeky. People who are crazy into the hobby will be there, and that's fine. Like they are at Gen Con, but at Essen you also get the nuclear, the family with the kids who just went to a convention to go look around and sit down and play something with the kids. And hey, look at that! Let's go try this little game out. And they're there to sample what's out there, and they'll buy a couple of games that the kid really gravitated towards, and then they go home. And that was their extent of gaming.
More part of their culture.
Yeah.
Gaming is a bigger part of their culture, I think, than it is here in America.
Yeah, very much so. So you get that feeling,
It's very interesting to me to see the different dichotomy at Essen and Gen Con. They're opposite in a sense. At Essen, there's huge crowds, so big that they actually open the halls early. They would never do that at Gen Con.
Right.
They open them on time, and that's it. But those huge halls, and then people rush in. And there's a few people rushing to, like, Japan brand to buy the little Japanese games.
Right.
But for the most part, people are rushing in not to buy games, but to get to tables where they can get to be the first one to play a game because they played a full game. So all the Terraforming Mars, get there, sit down, okay, great. Now we get to spend the next couple hours playing this game.
Yep.
At Gen Con, they're rushing in to buy. I need to get in line and buy these games, and there's lines all over at different booths. But even though that's how the rushing in is, the overall aspect of the conventions is the opposite. At Essen, most people go there to buy games.
Yes.
And at GenCon, a good chunk of people go there. Some of them never even go in the exhibit hall. They're just there to play games.
Sure.
Right.
Or another thing that GenCon has that Essen does not is at GenCon there is a lot of events. There's only a very few events at Essen, but GenCon has shows that you can get involved with, and RPGing events, and gigantic games that you can play. And there's a little bit of that at Essen, but not nearly as much.
Right.
I think Sam nailed it on the head there when he said that it feels like a trade show, but open to the public, you know.
Right.
There's that aspect there where it's almost not designed to be the circus of gaming, you know, that you get in something like a GenCon. It is companies, sometimes quite serious companies, there to show you their product. We will show you. We will, you may have a sample of said product, and now would you like to take one home, you know?
Right.
And so it's that different feel to it. Now, those things being very different, I think the moving about the conventions are very similar and sometimes quite problematic, honestly, especially this year. I don't know what it was, but this year at Essen, it just felt so incredibly crowded, more so than the last couple of times I've been there. The restroom situation was problematic. There were lines at all the restrooms, you know. Getting food seemed to be a bigger issue this year because every place was crowded. Even like on the third, fourth day, even when you just think about walking into one of the big halls, it's sort of like, okay, here we go, you know, get ready for the battle kind of thing.
Exactly what it feels like.
Yeah. And I don't know, both of them definitely have that quality, I would say.
Yeah, I think that the walking around aspect at Essen was not as bad for me as it is at GenCon, because at GenCon you're dealing with less space. I think I don't know, this is just a guess.
You mean in the exhibit hall specifically?
Just as a matter of square footage or what have you. I would say that the space that the hall represents at GenCon is maybe a fifth of the square footage that you would have at Essen.
Sounds about right.
So you're taking about the same number of people, give or take a couple thousand, and you're cramming them into 1/5 of the space. But as you said, they're not all going to at GenCon into the hall.
Right, like some RPGers go and they just play role-playing games the whole time.
Right.
Yeah.
But with Essen, you know which halls are going to have the most crowds, and if you want to, you can avoid them. Because I did for the most part. I think I only went into Hall 1 and Hall 3 maybe once or twice. During that entire, because that's not me. I do not like being shoulder to shoulder with people, and that it just really bugs me. So I would purposefully, I had to go in there a few times because I wanted to get a couple of the games that were in there in those two places. But for the most part, I stayed away from Halls 1 and 3 because I knew that we were going to get those games, generally speaking, so I wasn't really worried about it. I went in there to see because there were a couple pinpricks that I needed to pick up. But for the most part, I just stayed in the other halls. But yeah, like getting lunch that one day.
Oh yeah, it's problematic for
every
sure.
Every single vendor was like 25, 30-foot line, and every single one of them. It was just bad.
Well, there's always the licorice sticks.
That's not lunch.
Now the conventions are different. People always say, which one has better games? And it's really a toss-up each year. There's no question that more games are released at Essen. It's not even close, really. Right. I would say, it's almost double the number of games are released at Essen. However, the number of big-profile games, it's much more even. There's a lot of high-profile games, and sometimes more released at GenCon. It all depends when games come out, although GenCon often has lower qualities of these games. GenCon runs out of GenCon runs out of games consistently.
Yes.
Almost every year, there's like 7 or 8 games that have sold out, and these are games that everyone really wants. At Essen, games sell out, but not on the first day.
Also the question of when does something get released? Those many games get released at GenCon first because it's first, in the calendar year. But they get released here. many of these games are being released for the first time there in Europe. So if you counted those, which we don't because we've had access to them here, right? But if you counted those as being released there, which oftentimes they are, that's the first time you're seeing them in Europe, then that number even moves up exponentially, And I guess the thing about it is, for me, it's that the combination of types of games that you'll see there, it's a much more worldly scale. You'll have a big American release right next to a big European-only release, right next to a tiny little game from Japan, like you said, right next to some other game no one's ever heard of, and they're all there. They're all shoulder to shoulder, and so you can get the scope, I guess, is what baffles me a little bit, and I love it. I love being able to see all those things together.
Well, there's definitely the small publishers are at both. Kickstarter has invaded both. There's a lot of, hey, we're on Kickstarter. So let's say money is no object, because obviously money is going to factor in which one you could go to. If you live on one side of the world, it's cheaper to go to one or the other.
Right.
But let's say money's not an aspect, and so I'm not talking exhibitor, but you going around and just having a fun time, which one would you go to if you could only go to one?
I actually told somebody on Saturday that if I were not going to it for work, if it was just a convention that I was going to because I wanted to go to it, I would not go to Essen. I just wouldn't, because...
And we're taking out the aspect that you love Germany.
Correct.
Because you do that was a cool thing for you.
Yes, and that was the high point of the whole trip for me, was just the fact that we were in Germany and I was able to be in that culture again. But if I'm just regular Joe Schmo gamer and I want to go to a big convention, there's no real concrete reason for me, other than if you really want to get the game, that game, or whatever. There's really no concrete reason for you to go to Essen because of GenCon. I can drive to GenCon. I have to purchase a ticket. I know you said that that money's no object and everything like that. I just don't. Essen is not my kind of convention. GenCon is closer to my kind of convention.
But you actually prefer smaller, like Origins yourself anyway, right?
I do, yeah. I do.
What about
but
you?
if I had to choose between the two, it would be GenCon.
I guess for me, again, assuming there's a lot of things that go into it, okay? Like a 9-hour flight. That's
okay, yeah,
part of it.
but take all
assuming
that out
I can
of
just
it.
blink and be at one or blink and be at the other, I like Essen a little bit better. And again, I like it because of things there that appeal to me, like games that didn't come out in English or never came out in the U.S. I like it because, again, I get a bigger scope. At least I think I do. I don't have numbers to back this up, but I feel like I'm getting more publishers there from more backgrounds, Like there will be a publisher there from Spain. And I can get that game, I can look at it, I can play it. I can't here, I can at GenCon. You have German publishers that don't have representation or a booth at GenCon. Things like that. And that's why I like that one a little bit better. I like being able to sample all those things in one place.
For me, it's really close. If I'm just going as a person, Essen is neat because there's a sense of discovery. There's just, again, that worldwide feeling to it, and I like that a lot. And I also like the fact that if I was taking kids, it would be Essen easily, just because there's like a little circus they can be involved with, and all like toys and things. But I think if I'd probably pick GenCon, and that's only for two reasons. One, I like the fact that GenCon never shuts down, and Essen does.
Yeah.
But I also like spectacle. I like to see things that maybe aren't gaming. Like I might go watching guys fighting with a foam sword for a while. Sure. Or I might go, if I want to go be in a mega game of something, there's more of that stuff at GenCon, or a costume parade or something. And there's a little bit of that at both. And there's also a little bit of that worldwide sense that's starting to come into GenCon now.
Yeah.
So they're actually becoming more and more like each other as they speak. But if I had to pick one, it might be GenCon. But that's only as someone going to them. How about as the Dice Tower? I would say that the fans that come up and talk to us and everything feels equal at both of them to some degree. We were talking to people. Well, now Essen gives us a better booth than GenCon for sure. I don't think that's even close.
And a cheaper booth.
Yeah. And I also like, as an exhibitor, I like how in Essen, right around the corner, there's like, I know you guys made fun of me, but the slushy thing, but not even just that, but I like that there's food booths like scattered throughout.
Yeah.
They do, and that's actually a big difference because they do mix in food booths with display booths, for companies.
Yeah.
Like I had lunch in our hall one of the days, and I just walked out. I didn't have to go outside for food,
Right.
At GenCon, you need to go to the food trucks at least.
Yes.
Unless you want to have the really bad food in the
Of course, to be
convention
fair, if you
center,
leave
right?
the convention center at Essen, there's not a lot that's super close either.
No, I mean, not really, but I like that aspect of mixing in, you can go buy a drink right here, then step over and buy a bratwurst or something. So
Yeah.
I like that.
Had a more of a carnival atmosphere as far as food is concerned.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
We do shows at both conventions, and both shows went extremely well. We got the biggest room at both conventions, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And we get to meet lots of publishers, and we meet different people. We meet, I would say, like the crossover people we meet, it's very small from Gen Con to Essen. The only other
Sure.
people we meet, we meet some
Couple of
exhibitors and
publishers,
stuff,
but
right?
that's it,
But
yeah.
for other than that, they're very different audiences. So I don't know, which one should you go to? I'll tell you what, you also don't have to go to either.
Yeah.
If you don't like huge crowds, there are plenty of smaller conventions everywhere.
And that's the biggie, really. I mean, it's not... if you are going there and you are going to feel like you're putting up with crowds to grab a couple of games, just wait, because the games are likely to be available soon, quite possibly cheaper, and you don't have to deal with the crowd. Going to these conventions to buy games is part of that experience. I think going to a convention just to buy games kind of defeats the purpose, You are going to be putting up with things to buy games. You need to go for the experience of a big
You're
con.
also spending a lot of money when you could have
You
saved
are.
it. That's
You
expensive
are, yeah.
shipping.
But going to a convention, the buying games is just part of that. It's the spectacle, the crowds, the big booths, the banners, the colors, the people, the energy. It's a package deal. You don't get to pick and choose, unfortunately. So you got to make sure you want the whole package, all of that. So yeah, I agree with you. But at the end of the day, if you want to go to one of those big conventions, go to the one that's closest, If you're in the States, go to GenCon. If you are in Europe, go to Essen. That's the simplest way to test that water,
If you're in Japan and Korea,
Go to
go to whichever one is closer, I guess, or whichever one, go one year. It's neat to go to these. I've met people who said, in your life you should go to Essen once. I don't know that I agree with that. It is a neat experience, but if you want to go out and have neat experiences, you don't have to go to a game convention. You could just go visit London. You can go visit Berlin. There's these cool places you could go to.
Yeah.
When we go to these conventions, we don't do a lot else other than sing the thing,
that's
unless we add days before and after our trip.
Right.
which is rare, right?
So, well, that's our thoughts on Gen Con versus Essen. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. I'm curious, for people who've gone to both, what do you think?
Yeah.
Anyway, until next time, I'm Tom Vasel.
Zee Garcia. Thank you, everybody.
Sam Healey. See you on the flip side, y'all.